Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being on our program today. And we have CEO of S3 Productions, Mr. Kurt Hahn, on our program. He's been a mentor to me in many levels, and we help each other and fellow teacher as well, both retired. And we take on a lot of discussions on things that we want to reflect on. And one of the things is that he maintains a webpage, multiple actually, where he poses questions and we get discussions and debates between a variety of individuals, not necessarily only teachers, but added on persons of the industries and people that I know in my network, and we sort of put everyone together. And we're working on a new topic today, which something that I think really caught my interest, very, very important, I believe. And Mr. Hahn, I want to thank you for posing the question. And the question is, what motivates us? What motivates us to learn? And we're not focusing on what it is for students, but the actual teachers for us to reflect ourselves. What's our skill? What do we do to learn, motivate ourselves to learn? And I guess the more we get in touch with that, we can pass it on to others as well. So first of all, I want to thank you for posing the question to all of us. And let me pass it back to you. I'll reflect the question back to you. What motivates you to learn?
Unfortunately, I'm not sure I have the answer to that. I think it's expansion of my world. Going beyond four walls, going into things that I've always wanted to pursue, just to learn maybe a little bit. Being retired, I have found I'm learning things that I want to do rather than things I've been mandated to learn. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but pursuing things I think are interesting. And I think most importantly, it keeps the mind active. I know I'm speaking rather philosophically, but I really don't know the answer or best way to express it.
Well, let me ask the question, and I'm sort of asking myself while you're talking, is let's go back to us being children.
Yeah.
And I don't know what age, as far back as you can remember, when did you realize you liked to learn?
I wasn't a child anymore. Let's go to high school. Let's jump a few years, okay? High school was something I endured, nothing I enjoyed. You were learning things that you had to know because you were going to go off and take on the world. And people telling you what your opinions were and covering things you really didn't care about, at least for me, because your future was laid out according to some plan. Didn't know what the plan was. I don't think anybody did. And then when I got out of high school, I went and joined the Navy. And then I realized I better learn this stuff that I needed to know to survive in the Navy. And then I sort of took off with learning from there. I think as a child going up through high school, you're learning things that for survival, things you need to learn to match some level of expertise before you become an adult. I'm still waiting for that bolt of lightning to come down and hit me on the shoulder when I turned 18. Still waiting for it. And the second bolt of lightning that comes down and zaps you at 21 says you're now an adult. So I think learning is more of training at that age. And I could be wrong. I mean, probably really am, but it's my opinion. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it, as the song says.
Well, posing the question to myself, I remember at a very young age um, being fascinated by a question.
Yeah.
Whether it came from school or whether it came from just conversations with, you know, my friends back then, I remember when somebody would pose a question, um, I remember just sometimes sitting down and trying to figure out the answer. And if I didn't know, that motivated me.
Yeah.
That made me get up and say, okay, what resources do I have to find the answer to the question? Some of the things I ended up finding that I was almost like an experimenting on my own. I'll give one example, and that was dangerous, you know. But it was the sense of the curiosity. I'll you know, I grew up in the space age when we were beginning to go into space, and I remember asking the question in my own mind: um, Can I make a bottle go up in the air? And to answer the question, I got a hold of a Coke bottle, which was made out of glass. I filled it up with a little bit of gasoline.
I can see where this is going.
I stood it up. I put a little bit of a cloth underneath, and I put the match on. You know what happened?
Yeah.
Nothing happened to me. I still to this day, it's one of those things I marvel that I look down on myself once that bottle exploded and nothing happened to me. But the question was just driving me nuts.
Yeah.
And then I moved on to other kinds of trying to prove the theory, what makes something go up in the air. And I eventually found it in a toy. But once I got a hold of that question, it just would not let go of me. And I'd go to school with it. I'd come home with it. I'd go to sleep with it. And I couldn't just, I couldn't get it out of my head. I had to continue finding the answer. So I remember that at a very young age. I guess I'm talking about maybe 7 or 8. And it's just once a question gets in my head, a particular question, I'm addicted to it until I find the answer.
You know, I'm very thankful my parents encouraged learning. You know, we did a lot of things, a lot of trips and vacations and stuff, focusing on going and seeing and doing things, you know, as opposed to school, which, you know, ding, 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 ding. But, you know, I didn't get into that questioning stage until I got out of high school, basically. Because again, everything was more or less very regimented. I can remember teachers that, you know, reading books. High school almost killed my love of reading. Thank God my grandparents were able to save it. Because nothing worse than having to read some stupid book and what's your opinion?
But
you know.
But what motivated you to read? You know, not so much, you know, how it may have been, you know, diminished, but what initially, as far back as you can remember, what motivated you to read? Because reading is learning.
Reading is, I agree. What motivated me to read was when I was reading stuff I wanted to read, as reading opposed to reading stuff I had to read.
But you had access to a library, I mean, at a very young age. It wasn't just school as being the only source of your books.
Yeah, I know, but it wasn't entertaining at that time. It was there. You know, I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Not sure I understood.
Well, in other words, I didn't read for pleasure until my grandparents turned me on to Louis L'Amour westerns and Perry Mason murder mysteries. And then I realized, hey, wait a minute, there's a world of stuff out there that's a lot more fun than this stuff. And then I went in the Navy, and you have to understand it was what free time you had, there's not much to do. So reading, you'd read everything in sight because that's about all you had, you know. And that's what really then got me excited about reading, which then led to your experiences going off into different directions.
Now, there's a word we hadn't used, but it's starting to make click in my head is to take it a little bit to a higher level than saying motivated, what excited us to learn? I guess that brings a certain amount of clarity in my mind. What excited you, and what still excites you today to learn, regardless what it is, you know?
What motivates me now to learn is what you had said earlier, finding an answer to a question. Or in some cases, having the answer that has asking the questions to further define the answer. How do you solve a problem? How do you take what you know to figure out what you don't know? And that's what motivates the answer. I forget who said it, but it's not the destination, it's the journey that's important. You may not get there, but what you learn in the process is of infinite value to you. I can remember a wise gentleman telling me that if you don't do it, you're never going to know if you can do it or not. You know, I'd rather fail and know I failed than not try and not know. The answer may be the wrong answer, but the questions are a lot of fun.
There's another word we haven't mentioned. It's more fun for me. I use the word with it. It's fun to be a detective, to find the answer. Sometimes it's a physical answer, and sometimes it's a mental answer, you know, trying to find the right answer to a right question. And I think it's more fun than just not doing anything.
Well, I discovered these things called the Great Courses. I'm not sure how well you can. They're college level.
The Great Courses, right? The series.
Yeah, they're lecture series. They're college lecture series about the college. And I did one on the arts and crafts of mathematical. I'm trying to put line up with the camera. Arts and craft, mathematical problem solving, which got into some really weird math, which is what I wasn't really interested in, was the methodology behind it. And one of the things he talked about was something called getting your hands dirty. As you have this problem, you sort of jump into it without worrying about the answer. And that really clicked when I started hooking up wiring in my van. You just start doing it, you know, and then let it all sort of form into place. There's another one I'm doing now called Medical School for Emergency Medicine. Not because I want to be a doctor.
Please don't become a doctor.
But the idea is, how do you diagnose? How do you use diagnostic tools to figure out what's going wrong? You know, and I go back to when I was a teacher. These things are infinitely more valuable now, and I can see how they'd be quite valuable to a teacher if they could do stuff like this and draw their own conclusions and apply it back to their classrooms, you know, rather than, you know, being force-fed the flavor of the month.
Well, you know, schedules on the school sites are whole different things, but
you know,
I think an area that I hadn't considered until this moment was, is it possible to, I won't say kill, I'll say diminish substantially the desire to learn, the motivation to learn. But I'll answer the question myself. I'm sort of thinking and talking at the same time. I guess if I'm waiting for someone to motivate me to learn, I really think I didn't mature for myself.
Yeah.
You know, I'm dependent on someone else to say, push a button in me and says, oh, you should go out and be excited to learn about this. I think there's something substantially wrong with the individual that says, well, nobody told me to go out and, you know, learn something. So it has to come from the soul, a curiosity, an insatiable curiosity to want to know the next level, to want to know more, to add more information to it. And like you said, maybe it's not important to make sure that it's useful, but learning for the sake of learning, and then believing that somewhere along the line you're going to need it. Life has got many complexities. Or we learn something that when you started this conversation, it opens new doors. Now you say, I can do that because I have 30% of information. Maybe I'll pick up the rest as I'm doing it. But I think for anyone that says, well, I'm not motivated to learn because no one really has excited me, I think that's wrong. I think that's a cop-out.
I do too. And I think no, I shouldn't say, trying to think of a better way of saying it. One of the reasons I retired was I saw an increase of students who did not have any desire to learn, didn't care to learn. If somebody didn't hand it to them, they weren't interested enough to get up and do it themselves. And they wanted everything handed to them. And to me, that was to the point where I couldn't stand it anymore. I said, that's it, I'm retiring. You have to have a desire here to move on. And if you don't have that desire, there's something wrong. I really believe that. I've had several inspirational teachers and went, wow, that's really cool. I want to do that. And that's what I wanted to be. And yeah.
I guess you added that point. You mentioned it, that your grandparents provided the foundation to be exposed to things which you could build on and become curious upon that. I think of my father and I think of my uncle as being two individuals, both in the engineering world, if you will. And they brought in subjects to me I had never even considered, but they opened doors for me and invited me to continue my journey into it. And once they did, oh my gosh, there's no end to it. Example, my uncle, in a summer project of his own creation, I ended up with a wetsuit made to my size, and he took me off to Laguna and he put a face mask on me and said, okay, we're going to go out in the water and go around the rocks. And once I was out there swimming, oh my God, it opened the whole world of scuba diving for me, which is something I just fell in love with my whole life. If he hadn't done that few seconds, I'm not sure if it would have been something much later that I may have discovered and lost all that period of time of excitement that it brought to me because of the motivation to learn. It just opened the whole new door. So, and then the excitement, the involvement, I want to do more of this, and figuring out how to do it and go to a higher level. I can go back to mentorships, great mentors, and maybe they didn't know they were being mentors. They were just constantly willing to take me aside and say, let me show you this, and then see what happens.
I can remember back in high school, I bought this old wooden rowboat. Now, don't ask me why I bought this old wooden rowboat. The nearest water was some man-made lake a couple of miles from home, Bought this old wooden, and I spent weeks out there, painting it and filling it with holes and working on it. And finally got it all done. And Dad came home, looked at it and says, okay, let's go. First place we stopped was a sporting goods store so I could get a life belt so I wouldn't drown in 8 feet of water. Took us down to this man-made lake and went up there and talked to the lady. He says, all I want us to do is throw it in the water and see what happens. So toss it in the water, and I get in there. Of course, it's got leaks and holes and water flowing everywhere, and I'm paddling around there. I mean, I could have stood up and probably been okay. Had a grandest time. Never boated after that until I joined the Navy, but it was sure cool to have my dad say, okay, let's go, and see what happens here, He said, I wouldn't worry about you drowning. I mean, you're surrounded by lifeguards. I mean,
curiosity. They opened the door of curiosity in us.
Yeah. And I sometimes think that we are and I say this with, tongue firmly in cheek. I sometimes think that we're not doing that to our kids or the future societies by just giving them everything and taking away those opportunities, whether consciously or unconsciously. Um,
I'm going to take it to another level. Same thing as you. I think if we're not motivated to learn, how do we help others to become motivated to learn?
Yeah.
If we're not in love with learning, I'm not sure. If I'm in love with learning, I'm not sure I'm going to teach it to someone, but I am saying my own energy as I'm learning and share it with others.
Yeah.
It gives them the option to decide, okay, you got this door, i.e., you can take another boat and see if you can fix it, or never do it and never offer the opportunity to anyone else to do it. Or, I'm sort of finding the answer to my own question. I think the worst people on the planet are critics. Yeah. They're a dime a dozen. They'll tell you it's never going to work even before you start it. And if you don't build a certain thick skin in your own self, you pretty much start believing people that are naysayers, and they're a dime a dozen.
Or the idea that you have this idea in your mind to do whatever, and you're not sure what this whatever is, but you have it in your mind. And then you have the naysayers.
You can't do it.
Or you have this idea to build this little thing, and they turn around and say, well, if you don't do this, and you build this humongous thing, your first shot at it, somehow you're a failure. You're not ready to build this big thing. You're starting with this little idea, and hopefully it'll grow into something. It'd be like telling a high school football coach on his first year on the job, saying, if you don't win league championship your first year out, you're some kind of loser, and we're going to bounce you out of here.
I'm sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for the person who's motivated to learn has to learn a deaf ear, like to people that either, if you're not going to help me,
get out of my way.
Well, I just ignore them. I'm just, you stay on your own path, and we'll talk after I'm finished. But right now, you're stopping me from getting to the other end. If we don't build that scenario, I don't know if I ever did, but I must have, because we all run into naysayers, and yet we still sit back and scratch our head and says, "Excuse me, I'm still working on the problem. I'll get back to you."
Yeah. I failed more than my share of projects. I've blown stuff up and had things catch on fire, but it's kind of fun sometimes. But
just make sure there's a fire extinguisher somewhere nearby. Yeah. I know that one. Or make sure you run fast enough the other way.
Yeah. But the not trying, or being told you can't or you shouldn't because it's not safe. I go back to 1960s when Kennedy said we were going to the moon in 10 years, and by God, we did it. We couldn't do that now because we're so afraid of this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this, that, and the other thing, that I don't think we could do it again, without that motivating force to make it happen.
But I'm gonna sort of take a counter issue on this. But then we have SpaceX.
Yeah.
Okay, when we've got other companies coming around as well, where they're ignoring the traditions.
Yeah.
They somehow or other found that road to get back on track. Yeah. And obviously it took very unique individuals to say, okay, okay, we're going to do it anyway. And here we are. Last night, they landed one last night. They brought the astronauts back from the space station. Yeah. So, maybe some individuals out there are starting to show us that we better get off our fannies and get off this comfort zone we're in,
Yeah.
and get our hands dirty again.
Yeah. Well, you know, I go back to even my little van out in the backyard there that I've been playing with. It all grew out of an idea to do something because I had a goal in mind. And you can't do this. And, you know, yeah, I'll go do it anyway. And all the things you learn in the process of doing it. Doesn't mean I'm going to be a professional mobile electronics installer working on people's cars, but all the things you learn in the meantime makes it cool, you know. But it all comes from that inner desire to go forth and expand my world.
We're running out of time, unfortunately, and we have to close the show. But another idea that came to mind along the great ideas that's stimulating my head and my ideas right now is that probably all of us, and I'm being very general, probably all of us have another voice in our heads that also says you can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, lack of self-confidence, if you will. And all of us have to get beyond it. We're not going to shut it down. We can either listen to it or we can ignore it. But I think all of us are inherently part of that caution. Be careful, blah, blah, blah. You get so intimidated by your own ideas and your own imagination that you stop yourself from doing it. But if you figure out a way that, okay, I'm safe, I'm going to put it aside, and you can work beyond yourself, the world opens up. You can do millions of things.
Yeah. You know, I go back to, and I found one of the things I miss about teaching, and I'm relating this back to something now, is the camaraderie and the collaboration of teachers. I call it the brain trust, those selected few that you can bounce ideas off and on, not for approval, but as a sounding board. And I find that when I go have coffee with the old man power hour, it's the same idea. You know, here's an idea. Heck, they may laugh at you. You know, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. But within a day or two, somebody's going to say, you know, if you take this and do that, it may work. You know, matter of fact, if they don't laugh at you, you almost feel left out. You know.
Yeah, I'm laughing at you right now to make sure you don't.
Yeah, but you know, the idea is it helps with that inner voice of doubt. You know.
Right. Oh my God, they laughed at me. I'll never do that again. I mean, that's what I'm sharing. One loses their self-confidence, and now you stop trying.
Yeah.
Instead of going with them and says, like you say, you know, you want to pick out those individuals. Says, you know what? Let's sit down and see what we can do with this.
Yeah. We ran an antenna line into my van, and we didn't realize it until we shut the door and cut the antenna line. And called one of the guys over, and he came over and he looked at that and says, "You bunch of dummies, that's not how you do it that way." I felt the love. I felt accepted. You know, I mean, it was, you know.
It wasn't just a critique. They critiqued it and then moved on to help out how to solve it. That's the problem. That's the issue, you know. You get past all the humor and then you say, okay, but let's all get together to solve the problem here.
Yeah. And I mean, we have our share of naysayers and everybody else, but you know, what motivates me, and I'm not sure if it's true for everybody, probably not, but you know, there's a world out there that I want to explore. And it may just be from my armchair, but there's a world out there that, due to technology, I can explore now, and that's what makes life really, really interesting. You know, I still read a lot, and I still read a lot of books, but there's things that I'm doing and I want to do that you can't do physically for whatever reason. You know.
Well, I want to thank you, Mr. Hahn, for being on the show here. We are dealing with the question, what motivates you to learn? And again, we pose this question you and I have debated it today, discussed it through ideas and sort of stimulated ideas off each other. We invite other peer members. It doesn't have to be teachers, it can be anyone who's interested to share their ideas to be on future shows. We can collaborate, maybe put 5, 10 people together who want to be on the show with us, and we continue discussing this. I think if we find the answer as to what motivates us and how to get around whatever stops people from motivating, we can stimulate it back into whatever industry we're in. Because I do believe with you, and I agree with you, there's a certain amount of culture now where it can't be done, or you shouldn't do it. And I think if we don't get outside of that bottle, we're going to be all locked in. I think we're going to see a very negative future for all of us. And it's really not something that needs to be there. There must be formulas and strategies of how to build this in ourselves. And if we're losing it, hopefully we can bring it back as well and re-stimulate it. So we're going to give out a couple of emails. I'll give out mine if you wish to give out yours. And we invite people to get back to us, let us know if they're interested in participating in this discussion, and then starting all over again. What motivates you to learn, and see if we can build a much greater consensus that works for everybody. My email is afsanchez66@gmail.com. Mr. Hahn?
Yeah. I would like to add just a small footnote to that. For my teacher friends, and I use the word teachers very, very liberally, I'm interested in what motivates you to learn, not so much methodology, educational theory, students, It's more what motivates you as an individual to learn. That's what I'm really, and there's no right or wrong answers at all. There's nobody here to say you're wrong. I just want your opinion.
Scientists, mechanics, anyone who wants to participate with the question that we have in here. And I think if we see it from many different persons and many different careers and perspectives, I think we can build a consensus we can all use.
My email is oscssw@juno.com. You can reach me on Facebook at I'm on Facebook. It's Kurt Hahn. I'm on Facebook, or Shop Teachers on Facebook. Either one. I don't having a brain fade. Sorry about that. But again, it's what motivates you. Not so much interested in how you motivate others. It's what motivates you.
Absolutely. So we're at the beginning of May 2021. Let's try to put this together between the middle of May to the end of May, where we bring a group of volunteers who want to help us out resolve this question. And we'll use this as a platform where we're inviting others to share, and we're open to hear new ideas as well. Mr. Hahn, thank you very much for joining me. May you go back to your, who knows how many projects you're ongoing. And we're like me, we start a lot of projects and sometimes we don't finish many of them, but hey, what the heck, we're having fun.
Well, I had an order just dropped off at my doorstep for a power cord for a CB radio so I can help a friend out. Because again, it's all part of that helping each other expand.
Absolutely. Well, we look forward to doing the show again and then bringing in other speakers as well. Again, my email is afsanchez66@gmail.com. And please contact us if you're interested, and we will share this out in our networks and put the show together. I look forward to that. Thank you, Mr. Hahn.
No problem, sir.